The stars had belonged to the Valkyrie Empire for 10,000 years. They had conquered 300 star systems. They had crushed warrior races that stood 12 feet tall. They had defeated hivemans that numbered in the billions. They had broken silicon empires that could think faster than light itself. Nothing in the galaxy could stand against them. High Commander Theron stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. The ship was massive. It stretched for nearly 5 miles from front to back. Its weapons could burn entire continents. Its shields could stop nuclear explosions. Theron had used this ship to bring dozens of worlds to their knees. Now, he stared at a holographic map of an uncharted region of space. His advisors stood behind him in silence. They knew better than to speak before he asked for their thoughts. The map showed a small yellow star with 8 planets. The third planet was blue and green. It was called Earth by its inhabitants. The species that lived there called themselves humans. Around this solar system, there were warning beacons. Hundreds of them. They had been placed by the oldest and most powerful races in the galaxy. The Eldari had put them there. So had the Numiri. So had the Sheth Collective. These were ancient civilizations that had existed long before the Velkar learned to make fire. Every beacon carried the same message. Do not enter this region. Do not make contact with the inhabitants. Do not provoke them. Turn back immediately. Theron had read these warnings many times. Each time, he laughed a little harder. His intelligence officers had gathered information about the humans. They had intercepted their radio signals and studied their broadcasts. They had watched their history unfold from a safe distance. What they found was almost amusing. Humans were weak. Their bodies were soft and fragile. They could not survive in extreme heat or cold. They needed to breathe a specific mixture of gases, or they would die. They could not regenerate lost limbs. A simple fall from a moderate height could kill them. Their natural lifespan was less than 100 years. By Velkari standards, they were practically insects. Their technology was even more pathetic. Just a few centuries ago, they had been fighting wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. They had only recently learned to travel beyond their own moon. Their fastest ships would take years to reach the nearest star. They had no energy shields. They had no plasma weapons. They had no faster-than-light communication. How could such a species possibly threaten the mighty Velkari Empire? Admiral Voss stepped forward. She was Theron's second in command, and she had served him faithfully for 30 years. But today, there was worry on her face. "High Commander," she said carefully, "I must advise caution." Theron turned to look at her. His eyes were cold. "Explain yourself." "The warning beacons," Voss said. "They were placed by the elder races. The Eldari do not issue warnings without reason. They have seen the rise and fall of 1,000 empires. If they say this region is dangerous, perhaps we should listen." Theron waved his hand dismissively. "The Eldari are old and afraid. They have grown weak in their ancient age. They see threats in every shadow." "But they never explained why they placed the warnings," Voss pressed. "They never told anyone what the humans did to earn such fear. Does that not concern you?" "It concerns me that my admiral has lost her courage," Theron replied coldly. Voss fell silent. She knew that pushing further would be dangerous. Theron turned back to the star map. He zoomed in on Earth. He could see the lights of human cities glowing on the night side of the planet. He could see their primitive satellites orbiting in neat lines. He could see their tiny space stations, barely large enough to hold 100 individuals. "Look at them," he said softly. "They fight among themselves constantly. They pollute their own world. They cannot even agree on how to govern their single planet. These are not warriors. These are children playing with toys they do not understand." He turned to face his command staff. There were 12 of them, the best military minds in the Velkari Empire. They watched him with absolute attention. "I have made my decision," Theron announced. "We will conquer Earth. We will enslave the human population and put them to work in our mining colonies. We will strip their planet of every useful resource, and we will add another world to our glorious empire." One of the younger officers raised his hand nervously. "High Commander, what about the beacons? The other races will know we ignored their warnings." "Let them know," Theron said with a cruel smile. "Let them see what happens when the Velkhari decide to take something. Perhaps it will remind them why they should fear us as well." He issued the orders. 12,000 warships would assemble at the border of human space. It was the largest invasion fleet the Empire had sent in over a century. It was enough firepower to crack a planet in half. It was complete and total overkill for a species that had barely learned to leave their own world. But Theron wanted to make a statement. He wanted the galaxy to see how easily the Velkhari could crush any opponent. He wanted there to be no doubt about who ruled the stars. As the fleet prepared to move, Admiral Voss stood alone in her quarters. She looked out the window at the endless darkness of space. She had a feeling in her chest that she could not explain. It was something she had not felt in decades of warfare. It was fear she did not know. Why the elder races had placed those warnings. She did not know what made the humans so dangerous that ancient civilizations refused to go near them. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. They were about to find out. The Armada jumped too faster than light speed. 12,000 ships vanished from Velkhari space in a flash of blue light. They were heading toward Earth. They were heading toward the Small Blue, planet that every wise race in the galaxy had learned to avoid. They had been warned. They did not listen. Lieutenant Minji was drinking cold coffee when her console started screaming. She almost dropped her cup. In 3 years of working at Sentinel Station 7, the deep space alarm had never gone off. Not once. It was supposed to detect approaching ships from other star systems. Everyone had always assumed it would stay silent forever. She set down her coffee and looked at the data on her screen. Her blood went cold. 12,000 contacts. All of them massive. All of them heading directly toward Earth. Her hands were shaken as she opened a communication. Channel 2 Luna Base. The face of a young officer appeared on her screen. He looked bored until she told him what she was seeing. Then his face went pale. Within minutes, her report had reached the highest levels of Earth's government. Admiral Tiho received the news in his office on Luna Base. He was 63 years old. His hair was gray and his face was lined with the marks of a difficult life. He had fought in the Mars insurrection when he was young. He had commanded the defense fleet during the Titan crisis. He had seen more combat than any officer alive, but nothing had prepared him for this. He looked at the tactical display. 12,000 alien warships. Energy signatures that indicated weapons far beyond anything humanity possessed. Shield technology that made their ships nearly indestructible. Faster than light engines that could cross the solar system in hours. By every logical measure, humanity was doomed. But Tiho did not panic. He had been trained for this moment. Every officer in the United Earth Defense Coalition had been trained for this moment, because humanity had known. This day would come for over 200 years. It had started with the discovery of the Eldari beacon. A deep space probe had found it drifting near Neptune. The probe had captured images and transmitted them back to Earth. Scientists had spent decades studying the beacon, learning its language, decoding its message. The message had been simple. It was a warning to other species. Stay away from the third planet. Do not make contact with the inhabitants. They are more dangerous than they appear. At first, humans had been confused. Why would ancient aliens be afraid of them? They were just beginning to explore their own solar system. They had no weapons that could threaten an interstellar civilization. What made them so frightening? Then they understood. The warning was not a joke. It was not a mistake. Somewhere in humanity's future, they would become something that even ancient civilizations feared. They would become a threat that the galaxy itself would learn to avoid. And so they prepared. For 2 centuries, humanity had built its defenses in secret. They did not advertise their progress. They did not send signals into space. They hid their weapons in asteroids. They buried their factories beneath the surfaces of moons. They developed technologies that they never revealed to anyone. They waited. Admiral Tiho activated the Prometheus Protocol. It was a single command that woke up every hidden defense system in the solar system. Weapons that had been sleeping for decades suddenly came online. Ships that had been hiding in the shadows began to move. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for an alien. Invasion received their orders. The War Council assembled within the hour. They met in a bunker deep beneath Luna Base. The room was simple and functional. There were no decorations. There were no windows. There was only a large table surrounded by the most important military leaders on Earth. Commander Yuna was there. She led the Orbital Strike Division, a fleet of fast attack ships designed to hit hard and disappear. Her pilots were the best in the solar system. They had trained in secret for exactly this kind of battle. Captain Wujin was there. He commanded the Stealth Fleet, a group of ships so advanced that they were invisible to every known sensor technology. No one outside of the military even knew these ships existed. Dr. Hannah was there. She was the chief scientist of the Advanced Weapons Division. She had spent her entire career developing weapons that humanity hoped it would never have to use. Now she would finally see them tested. Communications Officer Jun Ho entered the room with a tablet in his hands. His face was grim. "We have received a message from the alien fleet," he announced. "They call themselves the Valkyrie Empire. They are demanding our complete surrender. They say they will enslave our population and take our resources." The room was silent for a moment. Then Admiral Taiho spoke. "Send them a reply." Gunho nodded. "What should I say?" Taiho thought for a moment. He thought about all the generations of humans who had prepared for this moment. He thought about all the soldiers who had trained in secret, hoping they would never have to fight. He thought about his own children, sleeping peacefully on Earth, unaware of the danger approaching. "Tell them this," he said slowly. "You were warned. Turn back now or face extinction." "Sir, that might provoke them, eh? They're already coming to enslave us," Taiho replied. "They cannot be more provoked. But perhaps they are wise enough to listen." The message was sent. It traveled through space at the speed of light until it reached the Valkyrie flagship. High Commander Theron read it and laughed. His officers laughed with him. The idea that humans could threaten them was absurd. They did not turn back. On Luna Base, where Admiral Taiho watched the alien fleet continue its approach, he had hoped they would listen. He had hoped they would be smart enough to retreat. But deep down, he had known they would not. He turned to his war council. Their faces were calm and determined. They had prepared for this their entire lives. "Then we give them what they asked for," Taiho said quietly. "We show them why the galaxy learned to fear us." The battle for Earth was about to begin. High Commander Theron watched the stars streak past his window as the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They emerged near Jupiter, the largest planet in the human solar system. It was standard invasion protocol. Arrive at the outer edge of a system and advance slowly inward. Give the defenders time to realize they cannot win. Crush their hope before crushing their bodies. Theron smiled as his sensors scanned the system. The results were exactly what he expected. A few orbital stations around Earth, some patrol ships that looked like toys compared to his warships, a handful of bases on the moons of various planets, nothing that could possibly stop an armada of 12,000 vessels. This would be easy. This would be a massacre. He ordered the first wave to advance. 3,000 ships broke formation and began moving toward the asteroid belt. They would clear the path and eliminate any resistance before the main fleet followed. The first wave crossed the orbit of Mars. They entered the asteroid belt. Thousands of rocks drifted silently around them. The Valkyrie sensors showed nothing unusual, just dead space debris floating in the void. Then the asteroid started moving at first. The Valkyrie officers thought their sensors were malfunctioning. Rocks do not suddenly change direction. Rocks do not accelerate. But these rocks were doing exactly that. They were moving toward the Valkyrie ships with terrible speed, and then the rocks started. Shooting hidden inside, thousands of asteroids were weapons platforms that humanity had placed there decades ago. They had been sleeping, waiting, completely invisible to any scan. Now they woke up all at once. Railguns fired metal slugs at speeds that were barely below the speed of light. Lasers powered by nuclear explosions carved through Valkyrie. Armor like it was paper. The first 100 ships died before anyone understood what was happening. Theron screamed orders. From his command bridge, return fire. Destroy the weapons platforms. Retreat and regroup. But the chaos was too great. His ships were being hit from every direction. The asteroids were everywhere. Every time they destroyed one platform, 2 more opened fire. A Valkyrie captain tried to jump his ship too faster than light speed. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Panic flooded the communication channels as every ship reported the same problem. Their faster-than-light engines were not working. The humans had deployed hyperspace jammers, technology that the Valkyrie did not even know existed. Invisible devices scattered throughout the solar system that made faster-than-light travel impossible. The Valkyrie fleet was trapped. There was no retreat. From behind the rings of Saturn, a new threat emerged. Captain Wu Jin led the stealth fleet into battle. His ships were painted black. Their surfaces absorbed every form of radiation. They produced no heat signatures. They made no electronic noise. To Valkyrie sensors, they did not exist. The first sign of their attack was when a Valkyrie destroyer exploded without warning. Then another. Then 5 more. Antimatter torpedoes slammed into the flanks of the Valkyrie formation. Ships that had never been hit before, that had shields designed to stop any weapon, were torn apart by explosions brighter than stars. Theron watched his tactical display with growing horror. His ships were dying by the hundreds. They could not see what was killing them. They could not fight what they could not find. From the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, Commander Yuna launched her attack. The Orbital Strike Division rose from hidden bases beneath the ice. Their fighters were small and fast. Each one carried a single pilot. The Valkyrie could see these ships. They tried to shoot them down. They failed. Valkyrie weapons were controlled by combat computers. These computers used algorithms to predict where enemy ships would be. They calculated trajectories and firing solutions with perfect mathematical precision. Against any logical opponent, they never missed. But humans were not logical. Yuna's pilots flew like nothing the Valkyrie had ever seen. They made random turns. They accelerated and decelerated without pattern. They flew directly toward enemy weapons and pulled away at the last possible moment. Every prediction the Valkyrie computers made was wrong. The human pilots were not faster than the alien computers. They were not smarter. But they were unpredictable. They made decisions based on instinct and feeling. They took risks that no sane creature would take. And they won. Fighter after fighter screamed through the Valkyrie formation. They dropped bombs. They fired missiles. They rammed their ships into enemy engines when their weapons ran out. Some of them died. Many of them died. But they kept coming. They would not stop. They would not give up. Admiral Voss grabbed Theron's arm on the command bridge. Her face was pale with fear. "We have to surrender," she pleaded. "We have lost 4,000 ships. We cannot win this battle." Theron threw her off. "We are the Valkyrie Empire," he roared. "We do not surrender to insects." He ordered the remaining ships to regroup. 8,000 vessels were still functional. It was still more than enough to conquer a single planet. The humans had surprised them, yes. But they had surely used their best weapons. Surely they had nothing left. He gave the order to push forward. The fleet would bypass the asteroid belt. They would ignore the stealth ships and the fighters. They would go directly to Earth and burn it to ash. The Valkyrie Armada began its final approach. They did not know that the humans were just getting started. On Luna Base, Admiral Taiho watched the battle unfold on his display. His face showed no emotion. Beside him, Dr. Hannah checked her tablet. "They are regrouping," Taiho observed. "They are coming for Earth." Hannah nodded slowly. "Then, it is time for Project Fenrir." Taiho closed his eyes for a moment. He had hoped it would not come to this. The weapons that Hannah had created were terrible beyond imagination. Using them would change everything. There would be no going back, but there was no choice. "Do it," he said quietly. Hannah sent the authorization code. Deep in the outer solar system, something ancient and horrible began to wake up. The Valkyrie thought they had seen humanity's worst. They were wrong. High Commander Theron stood on his bridge and watched his fleet approach Mars. 8,000 ships moved in tight formation. Their shields were raised to maximum. Their weapons were charged and ready. The losses in the asteroid belt had been painful, but the Valkyrie Empire had suffered setbacks before. They had always recovered. They had always won. Ahead of them, the red planet grew larger. Behind it, barely visible against the blackness of space, was Earth, their target, their prize. In a few more hours, this would all be over. A small object appeared on the edge of their sensor range. It was tiny, barely larger than a fighter craft. It was moving slowly toward the fleet. The weapons officer almost laughed. What could something so small possibly do against 8,000 warships? He targeted it anyway. Better safe than sorry. He fired a plasma beam that should have vaporized it instantly. The beam hit. The object kept coming. It was undamaged. He fired again. And again, nothing worked. The object absorbed every attack like it was nothing. Then the object reached the front, lines of the fleet. What happened next would haunt Valkyrie nightmares for generations. The tiny object was a container. Inside it was something that should not exist. Dr. Hannah had called it Project Fenrir. It was a weaponized artificial singularity, a microscopic black hole, stabilized just long enough to be used as a weapon. The container opened. The singularity was released. A Valkyrie dreadnought, a ship nearly 3 miles long, began to stretch. Its metal hull groaned and screamed as impossible forces pulled at it from every direction. The crew had less than a second to understand what was happening before they died. The entire ship collapsed inward, crushed into a point smaller than a grain of sand. Then it was gone. Swallowed by a hole in reality itself, panic swept through the Valkyrie fleet like a disease. Soldiers who had never known fear began screaming. Officers abandoned their posts. Some crews turned their ships around and tried to run, forgetting that the hyperspace jammers made escape impossible. 3 more singularity weapons were launched. 3 more dreadnoughts vanished from existence. The Valkyrie had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had defeated every enemy they had ever faced, but they had never encountered anything like this. They had never imagined that such weapons could exist. The humans were not just fighting them. The humans were breaking the laws of physics itself to destroy them. Admiral Voss finally took command. Theron had stopped giving orders. He stood frozen on the bridge, his eyes empty, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. Voss pushed him aside and grabbed the communication controls. "All ships," she broadcast, "continue to Earth. We outnumber them. We can still win." But even she did not believe her own words. A small group of Valkyrie ships managed to break through the chaos. 500 vessels made it past Mars. They approached Earth's moon. Luna, hoping to strike at humanity's command center. 200 soldiers landed on the surface. They were the elite of the Valkyrie military. Each one stood 8 feet tall. Their armor could stop any projectile. Their weapons could cut through steel like butter. Sergeant Doyan was waiting for them. He was not an impressive man, by human standards. He stood 5 feet and 9 inches tall. He weighed about 170 pounds. He carried a rifle that fired chemical-propelled metal bullets. On his belt was a knife made of titanium. He wore standard combat armor that would not stop a Valkyrie energy weapon. He also had 40 soldiers under his command. The 4th Shock Infantry Division. They had trained together for 10 years. They had run combat simulations until they could fight in their sleep. They knew every tunnel, every bunker, every shadow on Luna's surface. The Valkyrie landed near the main entrance to Luna base. They formed perfect lines. They advanced with perfect discipline. Their armor gleamed under the harsh light of the sun. Doyen and his soldiers hit them. From 4 directions at once, the Valkyrie were strong. But strength means nothing when you cannot see your enemy. The humans moved through maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts. They appeared from shadows, fired, and vanished before the Valkyrie could aim. They threw grenades that filled the corridors with blinding light. They used the low gravity to leap over enemy lines and attack from above. A Valkyrie soldier cornered one of Doyun's men. The human's rifle was empty. He was wounded and bleeding. The Valkyrie raised his weapon to deliver the killing blow. The human pulled his knife and charged. The Valkyrie was so surprised that he hesitated for half a second. It was enough. The human drove his titanium blade into the gap between the alien's helmet and chest plate. The Valkyrie fell. Across Luna, the story repeated itself. Humans, who should have been dead, kept fighting. Soldiers who were outnumbered and outgunned refused to surrender. They bit. They clawed. They used broken equipment as clubs. They died, but they took enemies with them. When the battle ended, not a single Valkyrie invader remained alive. High Commander Theron received the report on his bridge. 200 elite soldiers, his best troops, killed by creatures half their size with weapons a century behind Valkyrie. Technology he finally understood. The humans were not dangerous because of their technology. Technology could be copied. Technology could be countered. The humans were dangerous because of something that could not be measured or analyzed. They did not give up. Any other species in the galaxy would have surrendered by now. Any logical creature would have seen the hopelessness of their situation and accepted defeat. But the humans kept fighting. They fought when they were outnumbered. They fought when they were outgunned. They fought when there was no chance of victory. They fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And that made them the most terrifying enemy the Valkyrie had ever faced. Theron looked at his tactical display. His fleet had been reduced to less than 3,000 ships. Most of those were damaged. Half of his officers were dead. The humans had lost fighters and soldiers, but their main defenses were still intact. For the first time in his life, High Commander Theron considered the impossible. He might lose. The battle lasted 11 days. For 11 days. The Valkyrie fleet tried to reach Earth. For 11 days, humanity pushed them back. Ships exploded in the darkness of space. Soldiers died on the surfaces of moons. The wreckage of destroyed vessels formed a new ring around the planet Mars by the 8th day. High Commander Theron had stopped giving orders. He sat in his command chair and stared at nothing. His mind had broken somewhere around day 5, and he watched his personal guard ship get swallowed by another singularity weapon. Admiral Voss had taken full command of the fleet, but there was nothing she could do. The humans had endless tricks. When the Valkyrie adapted to one weapon, the humans revealed another. They used missiles that split into 1,000 smaller missiles. They used electronic attacks that made Valkyrie computers turn against their own ships. They used suicide drones that carried no weapons, only cameras, forcing the Valkyrie to waste ammunition, shooting at things that could not hurt them. And always, the human soldiers kept fighting. On day 11, Admiral Voss looked at what remained of her fleet. 200 ships. Most of them could barely move. Their weapons were nearly empty. Their shields were failing. The crew members who had survived were exhausted, terrified, and broken. She opened a communication channel to Earth. Admiral Taiho's face appeared on her screen. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. He had not slept in days, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "You are ready to surrender," he said. It was not a question. Voss nodded slowly. "We have no choice. Our fleet is destroyed. Our soldiers are dead. We cannot fight anymore." Taiho was quiet for a long moment. "Your High Commander? Is he alive?" "He is alive," Voss replied, "but he is not functional. His mind could not accept what has happened. "Bring him to Luna Base," Taiho ordered. "Bring yourself as well. We need to talk about what happens next." Boss hesitated. "You will not execute us." Taiho's expression did not change. "We are not like you. We do not kill those who surrender. But your commander needs to understand something, and he needs to deliver a message to your empire." 3 hours later, a small shuttle landed on Luna. Admiral Voss walked down the ramp, supporting High Commander Theron. He moved like a sleepwalker. His eyes were empty. He did not seem to know where he was. Lieutenant Minji was waiting for them. She was the same officer who had first detected the Valkyrie invasion. She had been promoted twice during the battle. Now she commanded the security team that would escort the prisoners. She looked at Theron with an expression that was hard to read. This was the being who had ordered the invasion. He had planned to enslave her entire species. He had laughed at the warnings that should have saved him. Now he was a broken shell of a creature, led through human corridors like a child. They brought him to Admiral Taiho's office. The room was simple. There were no decorations, no trophies, just a desk, some chairs, and a window that looked out at the stars. Taiho stood when they entered. He was shorter than the Valkyrie by almost 3 feet. His hair was gray, and his face was lined. He did not look like a conqueror. He looked like a tired old man who wanted to rest, but his eyes were sharp. And when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Hi, Commander Theron," he said. "Do you understand what has happened here?" Theron blinked slowly. Some awareness returned to his eyes. He looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. "We lost," he whispered. "We had 12,000 ships. We had the greatest fleet in the galaxy. And we lost too. To insects." "You lost to humans," Taiho corrected him. "And we are not insects. We are something your empire has never encountered before." He walked to the window and looked out at the darkness. "Every species in this galaxy has a breaking point," he continued. "A moment when they decide that survival is not worth the cost. A point where they surrender. A limit to what they will endure." He turned back to face Theron. "Humans do not have that limit." Theron stared at him. "That is impossible. Every creature has limits." "We do not," Taiho said simply. "We have been through ice ages that should have killed us. Diseases that wiped out half our population. Wars that destroyed entire civilizations. We have faced extinction more times than you can imagine." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "And we are still here. We are always still here. Because we do not know how to give up. We do not know how to accept defeat. It is not courage. It is not wisdom. It is simply what we are. We endure. We adapt. We overcome. Always." Theron was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Happens now. Now," Taiho said, "we send you home. You will return to your empire. You will show them the recordings of this battle. You will tell them what happened when they ignored the warnings." He paused. "And you will make them understand something very important." "What?" Theron asked. Taiho's expression did not change, but something cold entered his eyes. "The warnings around our solar system were never meant to protect us from you. They were placed by the elder races to protect you from us. They understood what we are. They knew what we would become, and they were afraid." He stepped closer to Theron. "You should be afraid too." The surviving Valkyrie ships were allowed to leave. Their hyperspace engines were repaired just enough to make the journey home. They carried recordings of everything that had happened. Every defeat, every horror, every moment of human determination. The recordings spread across the Valkyrie Empire. Then they spread beyond, 2 other civilizations, 2 other corners of the galaxy. Every species that saw them reacted the same way. With shock, with fear, with a new understanding of why the elder races had placed those warnings, new beacons were added to the ones already surrounding Earth's solar system. The messages were updated. They now carried an additional line that had not been there before. They were given a chance to turn back. They did not listen. Years later, Ambassador Sora stood before the Galactic Assembly. She was the first human to address this body, the first representative of Earth to speak to the gathered species of the galaxy. The Eldari Elder, who had placed the original warnings, approached her after her speech. "We always knew," the ancient being said, "that your kind would survive whatever came for you. That is why we placed those warnings. Not to save you, to save everyone else." Sora smiled softly. "And now?" The Elder studied her with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. "Now the galaxy knows what you are, and perhaps, knowing that there can finally be peace, humanity had earned its place among the stars. Not through conquest, not through fear. Through the simple, stubborn refusal to ever stop fighting, they had survived. They always would."